Hello, this is Ken Yates. I'm a professor of clinical education here at the Rossier School of Education. And in this video, I want to give you a worked example of the gap analysis process. After a brief introduction, I'll describe the gap analysis process to you, the stages of gap analysis. I'll demonstrate its use on a typical school problem of practice. And then we'll stop frequently during the demonstration of the worked example to give you an opportunity to practice on your own using a worksheet that I'll provide. Many of you will recognize this scene. It's a typical meeting where everybody is arguing about what the problem is in a school environment, for example, and how to solve it. This is very typical. We often start with problems and we try to throw solutions at them without really stopping and diagnosing. In effect, what we really do is we identify a problem and then we have meetings and conversations about them and use our intuition. Or what have we done in the past? We've always done it this way. Or even bring in an expert for advice on how to solve a problem, and then we go ahead and implement the solution. Well, the unfortunate thing is that 2/3 of the time the solution fails. We also tend to throw money at problems without really understanding what's happening and why. And unfortunately, we blame the students. The very people we are here to help, we end up blaming them with phrases such as, "My students just are not motivated." Well, as Albert Einstein said, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So we have to approach problems differently. And that's what the gap analysis framework does. It provides you with the skills and knowledge to use effective research-based methods of diagnosing and providing solutions to educational performance problems. It's a problem-solving model based on critical and analytical thinking, including focusing on goals, data collection, and analysis. It's the vehicle we use to apply theory and research to practice. The steps in gap analysis are 7. First, what is our performance goal? Where are we now related to the goal? Thirdly, what is the size of the gap between our current status and the goal we've established? Then fourth, what is causing the gap? Fifth, what solutions will close the gap? 6, how do we implement the solutions as an integrated package, if you will, taking into account both knowledge, motivation, and organizational issues and solutions? And then how do we measure the last step? How do we measure our progress towards closing the gap and achieving the ultimate organizational outcomes and goals? So in gap analysis, there are really 3 key points to remember. The variance of gap analysis, everything starts with goals for the organization and for the different stakeholders within the organization. In the problem-solving process, it's important to distinguish between problems versus goals versus causes or influences versus solutions. All these have particular meaning in the gap analysis framework. Influences are diagnosed and then solved based on extensive evidence in educational, social, and organizational research. Now let's turn to the worked example document that accompanies this video. The document has at the top the gap analysis process model, so you can follow along in the model at what stage we are talking about in the video. And then it has each one of the stages or steps at the left on the first column, a worked example of a typical problem in educational settings, in this case a K-12 setting. And then it has, you notice, a blank column to the right. The blank column says, "It's your turn." I will stop this video at various places, and then you should be thinking about how you would complete that last column. Just write notes in. You don't have to be careful with your language, English, grammar, or to be complete. Just write some notes down to remind you of your thought processes as you've watched the video and worked through the worked example with me, and then apply it to your own problem of practice. So the first step is defining the problem. And what problem of practice are you facing, whether it be in a school environment or in a business environment or in any other kind of organization, profit or non-profit organization? What is the problem that you are dealing with? what is the problem that is on everybody's mind? In our case, the worked example problem is taken from a K-12 school, as I've mentioned before. And in this school, students are not graduating on time and they are not college and career ready, as evidenced by the school data. In other words, they are not getting into college, they're not completing A through G courses that may be required, and it appears that they are not successful in obtaining well-paying jobs that have a career future to them. And this is all gathered by the school data. So now it's time for you to define your problem. Consider your problem and write this problem down in the worksheet. Pause the video for a moment and write down the problem. Okay, now that you've written down the problem, here is the first critical component of gap analysis. This is the component which most people, in trying to solve problems of practice in their organizations, fail to do. And that is to translate a problem into a goal. A problem is often not controllable by us. We know it's a problem. It's influencing everything from our organizational performance, our team performance, or even a personal performance. But it's fuzzy, it's squishy, as you would say, ill-defined. And in order for us to be able to really address problems and solve them, we have to turn them into, or adapt them, or translate them into a goal, which is controllable. And as you know, a goal has components to it. Who is going to do what, by when, and how will we measure it? The next issue to consider is how your goal, that's translated from your problem, actually fits within the organizational goal. Organizational goals are broad goals derived from missions and visions statements of the organization. However, they do have observable outcomes. So you want to ask yourself, what is the metric and measure of your broad organizational goal that is derived from your mission? Take a moment and write your organizational goal that's derived from your organization's vision or mission. Again, this is the broadest goal that you can have for your organization. In our case, the organizational goal is that our school will graduate 100% of our students on time as career and college ready. That's the broadest goal that we can derive from our mission. But there are levels of goals. Your problem of practice, which you just translated and adapted to a goal, may appear as one of these levels of goals. In other words, at the very top we have the organizational goal, and then we have team or departmental goals, and then we have individual performance goals, the goals that you and I perform on a daily basis. Here's the thing. All of these goals have to be aligned. They must be aligned for the organization to achieve at a high performance. The goal that you translated from your problem of practice, consider it and think about it and ask yourself, does it align with the overall organizational goal? If it does not, then you may be pursuing a goal and trying to solve that goal or pursue that goal, and once it's accomplished, really doesn't add or contribute to the achievement of the overall organizational goals. You are going to be taking a look at who are the stakeholders that have to achieve your goal. Now, your stakeholders in a school, for example, can be obviously students. It could be teachers, of course, and it could be the administration and staff of the school, and it could be parents as well. And there may be other stakeholders in a school environment. And in any organization, you can consider who are all the people who have a direct impact on achieving our organizational goal. And these are your stakeholders. In our worked example, the stakeholder we chose is teachers. Why did we choose teachers? We chose teachers because teachers, we felt, have the most impact on whether or not students graduate college and career ready. And then we started to consider, what do teachers need to do? Teachers have many goals that they have to achieve, but one goal that they definitely need to do is to engage students with their courses and demonstrate that students' learning allows them to advance to graduation and to be college or career ready. This is what a real stakeholder goal is for a teacher in this particular case, to achieve our organizational goal. So take a moment and write down who your stakeholders may be and who has the most impact of achieving your stakeholder goal that you've written down. That is the translation of your problem of practice to a goal, and then create that goal as a stakeholder goal. What stakeholder are you going to choose, and what is their goal that needs to be achieved to achieve your overall goal that you translated from your problem of practice? So the next step in the gap analysis process then is measuring what is the current achievement of that goal, and then what is the gap. For this, you need to collect data. You need to collect data through a number of methods, measures, through surveys, document analysis, or observations. You want to collect data to be able to triangulate that data. In other words, if two or more of your data sources indicate that there is a gap in achieving your stakeholder goal, you can be pretty confident that this is really a problem, and that you can measure this problem using two or more of the measures. In our example, we went out and collected data in our fictitious school by observation and by looking at lesson plans, and also we asked the teachers as well. So we went through all three of those sources we mentioned, surveys and observations and documents, and we found that only 40% of teachers are teaching all the content that's required by standards at a grade level using effective pedagogy. So in other words, students were not achieving what they needed to achieve, and we were clearly looking at the teachers to determine whether or not they were teaching 100% of the content with 100% of the appropriate methods that then the students could demonstrate achievement of the lessons. Well, this 40% with simple arithmetic, as you can see, leaves us with a 60% gap. So now think about what data you would collect to measure your stakeholder goal and to determine what the current status is of that goal, and then subtract it from your desired goal to achieve the gap. And take a moment to do that, and then resume this video. So the next step is to determine causes. Now that we know what a gap is, we need to determine what the causes of the gap are. In the gap analysis framework, we consider that causes fall into three buckets or along three dimensions: knowledge, motivation, and organization. Knowledge is, can they do it? Do they know how to do it? Do they know when and what they are doing and why? And motivation is, do they value it? Have they started to actually perform the goal that you want them to achieve, the stakeholder goal? Do they persist at pursuing this goal, or do they give up in the face of challenges or difficulties? And are they using mental effort? In this case, mental effort has a very specialized meaning. It does not mean time on task. In other words, are they spending a lot of time pursuing this goal or trying to achieve this goal? What it does mean, are they solving or achieving this goal which may have new elements to it with new knowledge? Do they seek out new knowledge to pursue novel solutions to achieving their goal? The third is organization. Are they prevented from doing it? Is there a policy or a procedure or a process that is inhibiting your stakeholder from pursuing that goal and achieving that goal? Do they have the necessary materials? And most importantly, is the culture. Are there conflicts in the culture? Do the stakeholders have a shared value and beliefs about this goal that is shared throughout the organization, or all the other stakeholders who have to, again, achieve their own goals in order for the organization to achieve its goal? So the culture permeates all stakeholders and permeates the whole organization. Once again, to answer these questions, we are going to need to collect data. One way of determining whether or not there is a knowledge gap is to ask someone to actually perform the task that is inherent in the stakeholder goal that you are examining. You ask them to, in performing the task, you are priming the pump, if you will. Don't ask them if they can tell you what to do. Ask them to actually do it. It's performance, not necessarily memory. And if they cannot, then you want to eliminate a motivational issue. And you may say, do you value it and do you want to do it? And they say yes, then you may then have an organizational problem. So you want to ask whether or not there's anything preventing them from doing it. If they say no, then you can feel assured that you have a knowledge problem. In our worked example, we have to go back to our teachers and say, do they know how to teach 100% of the content with 100% effective pedagogy for each type of content? Do they know about the standards? Do they know about the content? So again, take a moment, look at the worksheet, and using some of the prompts for our worked example, ask yourself whether or not your stakeholders can perform the task, and ask yourself whether or not there may be knowledge missing, that be declarative knowledge or knowledge of ideas or concepts, or procedural knowledge, in other words, steps or the processes for completing that task that's inherent in the stakeholder goal. And write some notes down. Okay, the second dimension is motivation. Now, motivation is hard to see. Motivation is internal for the most part. So how do we actually measure motivation? Well, there are 3 indices or indexes of motivation that you can actually observe. Are people starting a task? If they have started but give up, are they persisting? And then finally, as we mentioned before, are they working smart? These 3 dimensions or 3 indices, I should say, of motivation are choice, persistence, and mental effort. In our case, the worked example, we have to ask ourselves, do the teachers value teaching 100% of the content, achieving all the content that students need to become college and career ready? Do they value teaching it with appropriate pedagogical methods? And are they confident that they can do it? Do they have self-efficacy that they are able to teach these students in their charge and to actually teach 100% of the content with 100% effective methods? Again, see the worked example in the worksheet for the results. And now you write down what you think some of your motivation causes may be. And don't forget, you want to try to think about how you would actually collect some data to determine value, or determine importance, or determine self-efficacy or confidence with your stakeholders. Finally, there is the organization dimension. Do your stakeholders have the essential resources to achieve their goal? Are there conflicting procedures for ways to reach the same goal? Is everybody on the same page? Are there mixed or conflicting messages sent about the priorities of the goal? And are the processes adequate for achieving the goals? And finally, is the culture conducive and supportive for your stakeholder to achieve their goals? Or are there conflicts in the culture because not everyone shares the same values and beliefs about that goal that you're trying to achieve? In our worked example, there are some policies and procedures preventing teachers from teaching effectively. Yes, there may be. Do they have the resources? And are there conflicts about values and beliefs? To see the answers to these questions, again, look at our worked example in the worksheet for the results. So pause the video and using, again, the worksheet, looking at the worked example on the one column, write down in the final column, or the column to the right, what you think some of your organizational causes may be. Well, the next step in the gap analysis process is solutions. Now that you have actually verified with data some of your knowledge causes, your motivation causes, and organizational causes of your performance gap for your stakeholder goal, you want to address those causes with evidence-based solutions. So now let's turn to knowledge, our knowledge gaps, and ask ourselves then, okay, we know that we had knowledge gaps. What would be the solutions to these knowledge gaps? What did they need? Well, in our worked example that we're going to use, we'll see that there are 2 kinds of knowledge gaps. But solutions also often take the form of information, job aids, training, or education. You'll see this in the Clark and Exley's text. In our worked example, we needed to provide information about the pedagogies. Our teachers knew what to do with the information. They didn't need training about very specific pedagogies to teach their students new strategies or teach them a concept about something. But they also needed job aids, which they needed to be reminded about these strategies. So they didn't need necessarily new training for the strategies, just reminded of what these strategies should be. But they did need training on how to engage students more effectively. There are certain strategies, specific strategies for engaging students in the classroom, maintaining their attention and interest, and these were the strategies that our teachers needed training on. And some teachers actually needed to improve their content knowledge as well, how to teach a particular topic with some of the new standards, for example, of teaching science. So take a moment and look at your knowledge gaps and ask yourself, do they need information, job aids, training, or new conceptual knowledge through what we call education? Okay, now we want to address motivation solutions. And motivation solutions most often require what we call the big three. People need to build their confidence. They need to be or have greater self-efficacy with respect to achieving their stakeholder goal. They certainly need to value the goal, because if they value it, they won't choose to pursue it. Self-efficacy, on the other hand, is most often associated primarily with persistence. In other words, if you are able to successfully accomplish parts of the goal, your confidence will actually grow and you will be willing to take on the greater challenges of that goal in the next steps or processes or stages, etc. So self-efficacy really influences persistence a great deal. And as we all know, if the mood is not positive within the environment of instruction or environment of the organization, the setting, that is going to take away from any of the effectiveness of what we are trying to accomplish. So in our worked example, teachers needed confidence or self-efficacy that they indeed could support all learners through effective instruction and the strategies that they use. Teachers needed to set concrete goals to include these strategies and benchmarks to work towards the increased student engagement. And the teachers needed to value and then choose to make greater content efficacy and skill a priority. They needed to choose to seek out new knowledge about teaching their content, especially if there are new standards. So they needed to value that. So these messages of confidence and value and concrete current goals become real important solutions in our worked example. Again, take a look at the worksheet and see more specifically what we've written there. Write down what you think your motivation solutions would be to close your motivational gaps or your challenges in motivation for your stakeholder in achieving their goal. And finally, we have organizational gaps. Organizational gaps, to solve these or close these gaps, requires changes in policies and procedures and changes in culture. In our worked example, we needed to increase the transparency and communication across all the stakeholders about the graduation policy and about what the criteria or our goal was about graduation of being college and career ready. This needed to be communicated, and then our progress towards that needed to be transparent. We needed to measure and then feedback to all the stakeholders what our progress was to, again, encourage us to keep us focused on that goal. And of course, we needed to provide teachers with the appropriate curricular materials and support for them to be able to plan and to be able to work together in their departments to come up with more effective pedagogical strategies. Take a moment, as we've done in the past, to write down what you think your organization would need to do to close your organizational gaps that you identified in the diagnosis section. Stop the video and then come back when you're ready. And then finally, all these solutions that we've come up with really will never be effective and have an impact on achieving our stakeholder goal unless they're implemented correctly. We need to provide the proper drivers, motivational drivers, and organizational support along the way to be able to achieve these their stakeholders' goal, and thus the stakeholders' contribution to the overall organizational goal, along with the other stakeholder goals. This means that all of these ideas and constructs that we've been diagnosing and then providing solutions for all have to work together and put into a cohesive plan that addresses all three, the K, the M, the O, the KMO, into a plan. Because if any one, as you can see in this adaptation of Kostner et al., this framework about systems change image, that anyone is missing, it's going to end up to impact our overall achievement of our goals. And then finally, we want to evaluate along the way whether or not we're actually moving towards achieving our stakeholder goal and in turn our overall organizational goal. And we do this on these levels of using the Kirkpatrick model, and each one of these levels, as you can see, addresses a different type of evaluation. One is, on level one, is how are people reacting motivationally to the activity that you've planned out in the implementation. Are they reacting well to it? Do they like it? Do they have a positive mood? And level two is that did they actually learn something? In other words, did they change an attitude? Did they change their learning? Did it actually, whatever activity you plan to implement your solutions, did it actually have an effect at the time of the activity or over time? And number three is that did people actually use it? We want to see whether or not the behavior of the teachers actually changed in our intervention of providing them with the knowledge and skills, the motivational messages, and the organizational support. And for that, we have to look at their behavior in the classroom. And then finally, does it affect the college and career readiness in our worked example? Outcomes based on the data. And the level 5 is often referred to as the return on expectations. What were your expectations for the implementation of the project or package that you created? So in our worked example, we involved all the stakeholders in all the stages of the implementation. So everyone had, quote, buy-in, end quote. We evaluated the progress of the change along the way using summative and formative tools. And we began with motivational messages and gathering data about who is aware and who has interest. Most often you start with motivation. You do have to bring people to the table and then have them buy into it and just try it. See if they will be willing to just start and engage with your plan and package to change those stakeholders. And then you need to monitor and support it for effectiveness. So take a moment and write down how you might implement all your solutions together, starting with motivation, but then how would you bring in the knowledge solutions and also organizational solutions as an integrated package. Stop the video, make a few notes, and then come back. So how well did you do? Look through your notes in your worksheet. What did you learn? What was easy to find out in terms of data? What was hard? What was easier or harder to implement? It all boils down to this framework that includes goal setting and then analyzing and solving barriers or challenges or influences in the knowledge dimension, the motivation dimension, and the organization dimension. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Be glad to answer them. Thank you.